Dear church, let's talk about unity. Hello, welcome to the Dear Church Podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley. I've got my good friend, Matthew Hyatt, with us. He is the preacher at the Burns Church of Christ, which is a community just outside of Dixon here.
Yes, sir.
And we have become friends over the last 9 or 10 months. And I am so thankful that you decided to come and be out. It took a lot of work. You know, you're in demand. You're a high-profile individual, but we were able to get you. So.
This is called the bottom of the barrel. I'm the guy in the next town over. So thanks for having me.
No, I mean, I love what you're doing at Burns, and you and I have become friends here, and this is something I wanted to do for a while, is have you on to talk about unity and just kind of set the stage. We're not talking about unity necessarily or finding common ground among all religions and churches and things like that. I'm just talking about, let's start with us.
Yeah.
Why is there so much division even among churches of Christ that we can't even find common ground in our own brotherhood? And you and I were having breakfast the other morning. I told you this story. I moved to Abilene 14, 15 years ago. And I noticed before I moved there, 38, I believe, churches of Christ just in Abilene. It was kind of the mecca of churches of Christ. I think somebody said per capita, the most churches of Christ of any city in America. So anyway, I moved there and I'm thinking, wow, 38 churches of Christ. We're going to get together. We're going to do things. Yeah. There's probably a lot of camaraderie and things. No.
If only.
Yeah. Nobody got together, really. Yeah. Nobody did anything. And it wasn't always, well, we don't agree with what you're doing and all that. We just didn't get together.
We didn't make the time.
We didn't make the time and all that. And so here, it's a little different. There's not a Church of Christ on every corner.
But there are 33 in Dixon County.
And there are a lot of smaller churches in our area that in rural parts of the county.
Right.
That, I want to talk a little bit about that. What's causing, and I don't want to say this like Dixon County has a huge problem with this. I'm not trying to single us out.
We're no different than anywhere else.
Yeah. Just what keeps us from getting together? What is it that keeps us from just opening our doors to one another, sharing this common ground that we have? We all love Jesus. We all want to get to heaven. We all want to do the right thing while we're here. What holds us back, do you think?
Inertia.
Okay.
Seriously, because, we're not in the habit of doing it. And especially when you look at, I said there's 33 churches in Dixon. I don't know if that number's still accurate, but the vast majority of those are churches with fewer than 40 people who are doing everything they can to survive, just to meet another Sunday. And it takes time, and it takes effort, and it takes intentionality. And if I come over to visit you, that's somebody from our church I'm not visiting. You can get here real easy without having any bad motives.
Right.
Now, let's be honest and say that there are places where there are bad blood or history. And in the Bible Belt, if you don't like me, you left our congregation, you moved down the road to another congregation. So the last thing he wants to do is come do something with us because he was running away from me to start with. So, there are a lot of factors. So that's what makes it so tough.
Yeah. And I feel like that, if we combined our efforts, we could do so much good in the community. And I think all of us individually as churches are trying to do, trying to find, the folks that are lost and trying to reach those folks. If we came together, pooled our resources a little bit. I wonder sometimes if we're not trying to build the kingdom of Walnut Street or the kingdom of Burns or the kingdom of whatever church it is rather than the kingdom, right?
Yeah. Oh, man.
I don't want to be accusatory here, but sometimes I think it's, with different churches, it's trying to build up the body where you're at, and we get to see the bigger picture, maybe.
It's so easy to lose sight of the kingdom.
Yeah.
Now, this story you may have to cut, but it's an old one.
It's always a good way to start.
That's right. That's when everybody leans in and starts listening. This is going to be good. But in the late 1800s in the town of Burns, there was a fire around the Civil War. That's not how the town got its name. People, it's a logical connection, but no, it's not the story. It's a better story than the real one, but that's a story for another podcast. There was fire. A lot of stuff was destroyed, and the churches in town largely were destroyed. So from the late 1870s, the early 19-teens, 4 different religious groups shared one building in the town of Burns. Really? And they called it the Old Union Meeting House. And they divided it by the hours of the day. This group had it from 9 to 10:30. This group had it from 11 to 2. And it lasted 20 or 30 years. World War I comes around. We started having a little bit more money, roaring 20s. And everybody built their own buildings. And they were all right in a row next to each other. Yeah. and I understand all of the reasons that's difficult. I mean, if I brought it up in a meeting anywhere, I'd get laughed out of the room.
Sure.
But to think about how much money we have tied up in real estate, Burns can't support a counseling center. We don't have the money, the staff. Walnut Street has this awesome ministry right across the street. If we work together, how much better could that be?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it sounds so great, right? And we talk about it in theory, and we talk about how, we're the Lord's church, we're all the Lord's church, we're all one in the kingdom. And yet it seems like, and again, I'm not talking about Dixon County now, I'm talking broadly. It just seems like, so often we figure out what it is that we can divide over rather than what it is we can come together on.
Exactly.
And sometimes the division, it's things that, matter a whole lot to somebody else.
Right.
That don't necessarily to me.
Yeah.
Whether it be, what you wear to worship, or, clapping after a baptism, or, to other things like a kitchen of the church grounds versus not.
It's funny though, even right here in this moment of the conversation, you and I are both a little bit nervous about what example we could safely use in that sentence.
You're right.
Because whatever thing I say, there's somebody who's going to be potentially, no, that's a real issue. King James only. But, have you ever noticed in sermons when we talk about this, what's essential and what's non-essential? Preachers almost always use the same illustration. We always say, what color is the carpet? Because that's literally the only thing we can think of that's safe for that conversation.
Yeah. No, you're right. And that's what one of the things we try to accomplish on this podcast is these are the discussions that we need to be having that nobody wants to have.
Exactly.
Maybe publicly or from the pulpit. But that's why we want to have these discussions, because we need to come to a good place. And I'm afraid too many times in churches of Christ, we're so fearful to have these discussions because we're going to be labeled, right? Or we're going to turn people, or we're going to get canceled, right?
Yeah.
We're going to turn some people off and all that. But it's important. I came to where I'm at today because I asked questions.
Yes.
I didn't grow up in the church. So I came to where I'm at because I asked questions. And I tell people, you need to value questioning. Always ask questions. But so many times we ask a question, it's like, well, why are you asking that? Yeah. Like, well, you liberal? What? No, I want to know. I want to come to a good spot, because we talked about this the other day too. I think in churches of Christ, a lot of times we come to a good conclusion. We come to the right answer. Yeah. But we don't show our work really well sometimes.
What is this, math class?
Yeah. It's like math class. It's higher math. You come to the answer, but did you show your work?
Right.
And I think sometimes we need to do a better job of showing our work.
It's funny. In the religious world, there's all these divisions. And if we're not actually speaking with each other, and I'm talking the little ones between non-institutional churches of Christ and traditional churches of Christ, mainline, and I'm talking denominationally across whatever spectrum, we tend to talk about each other, and we never get the opportunity to show each other our work.
Yeah.
And if we don't create space for that, the gaps are just going to get wider and wider.
Exactly.
We've got to talk to each other, not about each other.
Yeah. And I think autonomy is a good thing.
I love that.
I like the autonomy. And for those who are listening or watching that don't know, churches of Christ are autonomous in that we don't have a governing body somewhere in some other state that hands down the dictates of what we are to do.
Wait, who have been paying dues to then?
Yeah, you're giving money away somewhere.
It's one of those like Nigerian things or something.
Yeah, the Nigerian piss thing. So we work autonomously. And so, each congregation, ideally has eldership that makes decisions, and that plurality of eldership, the congregation submits to, and that's, governs what they do within the confines of Scripture, right? But that's where we get into the issue of unity is, I could say the easiest thing to say is interpretation. Our interpretation is different, but, a lot of times, unfortunately, it comes down to our own Mishnah, which was the oral traditions of the Jews. And, where they got in trouble with the oral traditions is they elevated them to the level of law and Scripture. And so that's where it became problematic.
It's okay for us to have house rules. It's okay for us to say, here's how we're going to do it. This is our tradition. What's not okay is for me to get in the pulpit and say, Walnut Street has a different tradition and they're going to hell. Yeah. That's where we've gone wrong.
Yeah. And even within our own congregation, binding that, again, you give the examples, whether it be, the one I hear quite often, and it's a generational thing, and I don't want to diminish it at all, because there are many people who feel strongly about it, and I don't think that that's bad to feel strongly about it. But where it becomes a problem is when you bind it, and that is dress. How many times have you heard, well, you are to wear your best? Well, there's a couple of problems with that if you want to bind it. Number one, it's not scriptural.
Right.
Where in the Bible does it say you are to wear your best?
Absolutely.
The only time it talks about wearing your best is in James, when it talks about be cautious about wearing your best, right? And some would say, well, but you look at the Old Testament, the priestly garments and things like that. And I go, yeah, but that's the same argument that we would bark back against if somebody tried to make that with instrumental music.
Right. We wouldn't hold that any
Yeah,
time.
we're not under the old law, right?
It's funny, the first thing I heard about you when you got to Walnut Street was he doesn't wear a suit and tie. And, I said, I'm going to like him.
That was a big deal.
Yeah, seriously. And I mean, that was, of all the things to say about a minister, first, how shallow of an observation. Thank you. You saw the obvious, but not helpful, right?
Yeah. That was the first thing you noticed.
That was the first thing I heard. Romans 14 for me has just become one of the passages that I think we don't get. And I mean we very generically. I don't think it's just Churches of Christ. I think it's Christendom does not get. Cancel culture you've talked about on some previous episodes. Romans 14 has this line. It says, who are you to judge another man's servant? It's before his own master that he stands or falls. You belong to God. I belong to God. I am not your judge, jury, and executioner. Obviously, I'm going to tell you the truth from what I think about Scripture. I'm going to try to be helpful, winsome, all of those things. But at the end of the day, my salvation does not depend on you getting it right. So I can take a deep breath and say, it's okay.
I can look inward before I look outward.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And with the example we just mentioned, I'm not anti-suit and tie at all.
No, it's a great thing. I love when people honor God that way.
Absolutely. What bothers me is when we raise it to a level of, where a preference or a scruple becomes binding. Now, look, in any of these things, where it gets difficult is, we're trying to set a standard because some take it too far the other way. But the problem with that is what we said a while ago, but also, who gets to determine what your best is?
Right.
So we become fashion police, or we become, code enforcers, which was never the intent.
Not our job.
And not what we are supposed to be about. And it's not just with that, it's with other things. I've seen visitors, and you've heard stories like this and witnessed them. Visitors run off because, during the song service, raise their hand, and praise to God. And we're willing to run somebody off over that, or they didn't wear the right thing, or maybe they came in wearing their hat and they didn't take it off.
I've seen people yelled at for drinking coffee in church.
Yeah, we've got to see the bigger picture here and understand that, look, what we're trying to get to here and where we're, the people we're trying to reach, we can't shoot ourselves in the foot by drawing these arbitrary lines in the sand that make us feel good and we believe wholeheartedly in. And again, there's nothing wrong with believing those things.
If you want to wear a suit because you believe it honors God, praise God. I'm glad you're doing it. Just make sure that you don't. It's not even always sometimes that you say things. It's the sideways look, or the whisper. And I think that's the stuff that most of the time that we have unity issues, it's not because we've had a knockdown drag out. It's because we haven't had a relationship at all. Right. So, you mentioned a couple of times you and I have breakfast. That's great. Because if you hear something through the grapevine and you think I'm a heretic, I have a pretty high degree of confidence that you're going to bring it up at breakfast and you and I are going to talk about it instead of you preach about me. Or you're going to ask, hey, I heard this. Is that really true? Because that's what you do in relationships. You talk to each other. So we really need to double down in investing in spending time with each other outside of our walls.
I agree. And it's good for churches and leaders to do that, because in the example with us, we can sit there and talk, and I can say something like, not that this has happened, but I can say something like, hey, Matthew, we've got a family here at Walnut Street. They're not happy. They're looking for a place where they can fit and all that. So
you're trying to get rid of your problem members. That's what you're doing.
Not at all. Putting them on waivers.
That's right.
But we've got
a transfer portal.
Exactly, transfer portal. So they're coming your way. Their soul is important to us. But instead of this competition, and I'm afraid that all too often in our communities we have this competition among churches who can be bigger, who can get more members and stuff.
And
like
I am really grateful for your predecessors here, for Brian, for Steve, and for the others. We have really enjoyed that relationship well. Where, hey, I hear so and so's coming over your way now. They didn't really fit in. help them find a spot. And then maybe 6 months later, Steve sometimes has called me, Steve Baggett has called me and said, is so-and-so plugged in? And they were, because we were a better fit. And we've sent people that direction too. And there's no competition among lighthouses. We're all here trying to do this thing.
Got the same purpose.
Let's help each other.
And again, the kingdom of heaven versus the kingdom of Burns or Walnut Street or whatever the congregation is. I think we've got to get out of our own way generationally sometimes.
Yeah.
I know that I'm very preference driven when it comes to certain things. Yeah. For instance, I didn't grow up in the church. And so, the older hymns, they don't have any nostalgia factor for me. I prefer the newer, and some of those are not really newer. Some of them are 1990s or 80s, but the newer songs really, speak to me more than the old hymns. Right. But that's a preference.
Right.
And it's not just about me, it's about everybody. And I think sometimes we get zeroed in on our own preferences. Yeah. And whether it be some of the things we talked about, or, I hear a lot, well, granddaddy always said, or daddy always said, and I'm like, that's okay. But, granddaddy was wrong in that case, or daddy may not have seen things the way, maybe the best way, doesn't mean that he's a bad guy. It doesn't mean that he taught you wrong. It's just, he was trying to bind something that we shouldn't bind.
And as Restoration churches, we believe that the restoration is always ongoing. Yes. Because the moment that we give up on that idea, we have become the thing that we said we didn't want to be.
Yeah,
we have to, we have to acknowledge that. I had a lady one time say, "Well, the church is just so different than it was, and the gospel's not supposed to change." And I said, "When you were young, we didn't let blacks and whites worship in the same building.
Right?
The
and
church
we thought that was okay.
The church has to." And I know that there are bedrocks. There are things that we there are non-negotiables. Ephesians gives us these 7 ones you and I've talked about before. It's a pretty good basis for these conversations on unity. There's one Lord, one faith, one hope. Good preachers would have that list memorized. Bind that on people. But just there are hard lines. Yeah. There's not quite as many as we've made there to be.
No, I don't. And I think we've got to be very careful. Maybe refusing people that God has already accepted. Mm-hmm. And I find a lot of Paul's writings very enlightening because they didn't all get along.
Right.
The churches he was writing to, unity was a huge problem.
Yeah, this isn't new.
No. And bigger than what we're dealing with perhaps with law versus grace and, Jew versus Gentile and that kind of thing. But still, the same premise is that Paul preached unity over and over again because he understood something we all need to understand, that we are better together. Yes. And the more unified we are, the more effective we're going to be. We can't show the world that this is a better choice than the way you're currently living if we're a soap opera.
Right.
Right.
We're a soap opera, what a description.
The world's a soap opera. You look around you, there's division everywhere. And people don't want to come to church and it be an extension of the world. Yeah. They want to see us united. They want to see us a family.
Church needs to be refreshing, refreshingly different than the garbage we get all the time.
Yeah, like a little city of refuge. Yeah. We can come in and get away from the world.
What a biblical idea, city of refuge.
And be focused on God, on one another. And, we talk about the vertical relationship and the horizontal relationship. You start with God, and, then you go to each other. And I think the world is hungry for that.
Yes.
And if they see us in disarray or operating like the rest of the world, what draw is that?
Now, I guess one point right here is the world is so used to seeing this disarray. Yeah. That's what our people know.
Yeah.
They know that if you don't get your way, you take your toys and run. They know that if your political views are different, you're no longer invited to Thanksgiving dinner anymore. Right. That's what they have been trained to by our culture. So one thing as ministers and as church leaders that we really need to pay attention to is how do we train our people to do different when it comes to unity? How do we train them not to say, if I don't get what I want, I'm done? Because that's what they know. And if we don't show them another way, they're not going to learn it. We're going to be having this podcast every year for the next 1,000 years, unless in our teaching, our preaching, and in the shepherding of our leaders, we say that's not how we do it.
Yeah. And I think it's important for every church member to ask the question, does this bother me because it's wrong? Or does this bother me because it's different?
Right.
And I think that's a key discrepancy because so many times the things that may bother me are not wrong. They're just different. Mm-hmm. And, the last words of a dying church, we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
this is one place where I believe in evolution.
Yeah,
the church has to evolve.
Yes.
It has to adapt. It has to adjust, or else it's going to die where it sits. A church that lives in the past really has no future.
Right.
And so we've got to be able to adapt and adjust and look at things differently and do things a little differently. That's when people have asked me, so, why don't you wear a suit and tie? And I said, well, I'm not against it. It's just when I was in Abilene and we had the TV program, I learned that there were a lot of people that were coming to our congregation that, felt uncomfortable stepping in and meeting the preacher, or if everybody had on a suit and tie, that was a little intimidating to them. And we could coach them up, and we could say, well, this is the standard and everybody needs to abide by that standard. We love you and we're going to help you get to that standard. So someday you want to wear a suit and tie. Or I can just say, you know what, in the grand scheme of things, that doesn't really matter anyway.
Yeah.
And so therefore I'm going to kind of split the difference. I'm going to dress nice and I'm going to look nice, but maybe not wear the suit and tie and just kind of, fall in the middle somewhere. And I feel like that's fine. But, we'd have people coming in and their best was a t-shirt and, some jeans with holes in them. And so I just tried to land in the middle somewhere. But I think we do have to think about those things. Take ourselves out of the position of, this is me, this is what I prefer, this is where I'm at, this is what I am the product of, the way I was raised, and then look at it from, okay, if I'm a visitor, and I'm pulling into the parking lot at Walnut Street, from the time I go in to the time I leave, what is it that I want to be presented with?
Yeah. Well, what will I notice? What will I feel?
Yeah.
How will I be made to feel?
Yeah.
And we need to recognize, you and I are comfortable in church. We've been here, I hate to say our whole lives, but kind of, we're here 8 days a week. We live, breathe, eat church.
Yeah.
But, the lady who comes in, whose life is falling apart, who's scared to death that we're going to judge her, who doesn't know where to turn, I need to be real careful that I don't do anything that puts a stumbling block in front of her.
Absolutely.
Because I remember Jesus saying something about people who put stumbling blocks in front of these little ones. He wasn't a big fan of that.
He wasn't a big fan of that. And, you come in and you're immediately turned off because somebody says something about your tattoos, or somebody immediately starts focusing in on, what you're wearing, or, whatever it may be. You've already lost that opportunity.
Yeah.
And I believe that Jesus took people where they were at.
Absolutely.
He just didn't leave them there.
Right.
And that's the key. Now, I do believe this, and I think this is important to point out. There's some things that we can't change.
Right.
We can't change the message.
We camp out on the divinity of Jesus.
Yes.
We camp out on the authority of Scripture, on the necessity of salvation, on the severity of sin, the need for holiness. We can live those places.
And we should, because the things we're talking about don't fall under that umbrella.
Right.
And so, yes, we have a divine message. We have a divine mandate. We have a master. Those are the things that we have to be focused on. But when it comes to methodology, that's where we've got to be willing to adapt and adjust. And I'm afraid that all too often we're not. And if we do, we're labeled.
Yes.
Or people cut and run, and then they point the finger at you ought to see what they're doing over there. And it's like,
I hate it.
Yeah, I do too. I have a preacher friend named Paul in San Angelo, Texas. And he used to say that he was talking to an individual who said, I can tell you the day that church became liberal, whatever this church was. And he said, so when was it? And he said, the guy said, when they had a candlelight service, that's the day they became liberal. And Paul goes, so candles, or what make you liberal? Yeah. And he goes,
good to know.
So what did they do in the first century when there wasn't electricity and all that, and
then the Restoration came around, we fixed that.
Or the person that told me one time, I'm just the most conservative person you'll ever meet.
Okay.
And I said, really? Because there's always someone that thinks you're going to hell, right? Because
congratulations. You want a sticker?
Yeah, it's a sliding scale, and where
I don't love the terms because they're so relative, and they're meaningless, and they usually turn into insults because they make me the standard. If I'm talking about liberal and conservative, liberals, anybody to my left, conservatives, anybody to my right, and that's made me the center of the universe.
Yep.
That's not how this works. Jesus is the center of the universe. Yep. Let's talk about Jesus, not this stuff.
Which you bring up a good point there. So who gets to determine unity?
I do.
That's right. Ultimately, really what it comes down to is the one who gets to determine unity is the narrowest among us.
Yeah.
That's really kind of where it falls. And like you said, I do. That's really kind of where it lands.
The parable of the wheat and tares really should speak to us here. When you come in and you find that there's good and bad mixed together, our inclination as God's people has been, well, let's get rid of the bad. But in that parable, the answer was you can't pull out the bad because it's going to damage the good.
Yes, and I think that's really where, when we talk about matters of unity, we look at Scripture and we see Paul certainly dealt with his fair share of disunity and disharmony.
Read Corinthians.
Read Corinthians. It was a mess. But so where do we find unity? What's our standard? Where do we have to be unified? What are the things that we have to be unified on? And I think you mentioned it a while ago, and we talked about this at breakfast. Let me pull up my scripture here.
You don't have Ephesians 4 memorized either, do you?
Well, I'm getting there. Ephesians 4:4-6, I think, is where we have to be unified. I think that if you want to talk about the things that we have to be united on, it's those things right there. In Ephesians 4:4-6, there is one body, one spirit, even as you are called, and one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in all. I think those ones, there's no debate, there's no waffling, there's no discrepancy. We've got to be united on those things. And so if you want a good place to start, if you want to answer the question, so what do we have to be united on? I think it's definitely those.
So I taught a Sunday school class one time, and I put together a list of 100 questions about church arguments almost. Can a church use instrumental music? Can you clap after baptism? Can you have a church kitchen? Just all over the place. Some that I had strong convictions about, some that I did not care about. 100 of them. They were all yes or no's, which was a little unfair, but
got a little bit.
When you teach the class, you get to be unfair if you want. And I asked people just privately, circle, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Then I want you to count how many yeses you have. And the class had about 50 people in it. And I said, all right, who had 90 or more yeses? Who had 80 or more yeses? Who had 70 or more yeses? And it was interesting because not only did no two people in the room have the same answers to the worksheet, no two people in the room had the same number of answers to the worksheet. It just kind of proves the point of how difficult this is. So you boil it down to some simple stuff like this. What does it mean that we have one Lord? The church has to be focused on Jesus. If it's focused on anything else, that's a line. I can't cross that line. Baptism is an important part of it's part of the journey. It's the initiation. It's the Red Sea crossing moment for us. I'm not here to judge the people who might do it wrong, but I'm here to tell you this is part of who we are. And you work your way through that list. This is who we are. We need to know who we are.
This is where I land. This is my identity is found in this, because at some point you've got to land the plane, right? I mean, we all know of people, preachers, teachers that have mastered the art of saying nothing well. They get done preaching and you go, wow, that was interesting. What did you say again?
That was 30 minutes of my life. I'll never get back.
I'll never get back. At some point, you've got to land the plane. And what is the runway of
Where
truth?
is home?
Yes, where is home? What's the destination we're trying to get to? And so we are by no means trying to suggest that everything is nebulous and we can't really know. And so we all just have to accept everybody's beliefs and plan and all that. That's not the case. We certainly land on authority of Scripture, the truth of God's Word. And we're talking about scruples. And it's like somebody told me one time, scruples or opinions are like belly buttons. Everybody has one. They're all worthless. Somebody was telling me the other day, they said, we just don't really have any good material or curriculum for Vacation Bible School by members of Churches of Christ. We just don't really have anything. And my first thought was, because no matter what was put out there, people would go online and deface it and talk about how terrible it is because it didn't focus on this or that. We're good at picking things apart and canceling people. And I think that's why so many people are maybe hesitant to write or speak out.
And to be fair, when you're a preacher, it's easier to tear down than build up. I mean, if I want a good, safe sermon, I can make a lot of people in our church real happy by talking about what's wrong with somebody else. And they'll come up and say, man, you really made me think that was sure good. But the moment we look inward, we don't like those sermons quite as much.
Introspective is not as fun.
No. You talked about this is not some nebulous thing. The way I like to describe it at our church is we don't believe that all roads lead to Rome.
Yeah.
Not every route I take gets me to Nashville from here. But it is true there are a few different ways I can get to Nashville from Dixon. I can take 70, I can take 40, and there's some that will take me a really long time to get to Nashville, and eventually I'll have to make some right turns.
Yeah.
I have to make some of the right turns to get there.
Well,
not all roads get you there.
Yeah,
but
that
more than one does,
Yeah, that absolutely describes my spiritual journey.
I
took about every path you could think of, but eventually, you've got to figure out where the right turn is.
Yeah.
And like you said, figure out where home base is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the key in all of this. Yeah, it's also tough, and I think that we've done this to ourselves. It sounds like we're bashing the church.
I don't like that.
But I don't like that either. I'm not trying to do that. I think we kind of done this to ourselves, though, is we constantly, or at least I know I do, I'm constantly saying it's not about you.
Right.
It's not about you. If we could get that message down and understand it's not about you, how much better off we'd be. But then you look at our churches, and it's like from the time you're in cradle roll all the way up, it kind of is about you.
Yeah.
It's like we have programs for the youth, we have programs for seniors, we have programs for, young adults, and we have all these different, ministries that we do in order to bring people in and get them plugged in, which I think are all great.
Right.
But we're kind of talking out of both sides of our mouth sometimes when we say it's not about you. And it's like, well, yeah, it kind of is.
And we need some bravery in our leaders, too, to confront this. Mm-hmm. Because this is a conversation that's all well and good, but when Sister Sally comes up after service to complain that she didn't get her preference, there's a whole lot of churches where Sister Sally is a third-generation member of that church, or Sister Sally is from a large family that constitutes a large block, where Sister Sally gives a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Sister Sally's squeaky wheel gets the grease, and we have done squeaky wheel ministry so long, we have created monsters.
Yeah. I think you're right. I like I like to say it's hard for the elders to shepherd the sheep when they're petting the billy goats. And
I've never heard that. That's good.
All too often we're having to pet these billy goats over here when we need to be leading sheep. So I think you're right. I think being able to confront those scruples to say, hey, I hear you, and that's fine and good, but it's a preference, and we're going to do what's best for the greater number of good, and understanding that we've got to adapt and adjust to move forward. I think about the church in Sardis. You have a name that is alive, but you are dead. I never want to be that church where we're alive in name only. We're actually dead on the inside, and we avoid that by being able to say, you know what, we're going to be united in a common effort, which is to be a movement. Yeah. First century church was. We need to be that as well. We talk about restoring first century Christianity. We always talk about what happens within the walls. Right. 5 acts of worship, all that, which is part of it. Yeah. But the first church was a movement. Read Acts 2. Read Acts 4. These people are house to house, breaking bread together every day of the week. And they're going. They're growing and going. And that's what we've got to be about. And until we understand that and do that, we're never going to be the first century church. No, not at all. Matthew, thank you for joining me. Hey, thanks for having me. This was fun. Yeah, this is fun. I mean, we tell people all the time, the podcast, Dear Church Podcast, is, these discussions and these questions that you may have behind closed doors and you talk about. It's not a sermon. It's not, trying to, lock down any kind of, not always anyway, some sort of logical, reasonable type of, we're just talking. We're thinking out loud. We're thinking out loud. And showing the work. And showing our work. And I think this was a good discussion. I appreciate you joining me for it. It was fun. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about what's going on at Burns, your family, what's going on in your life. It's good. It's good. Burns is a great place. We're growing. Things are going great. I've got 2 kids, 5th grade and 3rd grade. I'm getting old. Didn't know when that started to happen, but it's happening. We're just super blessed. It's a good time to be in the kingdom. Yeah, it is. And I'm glad you're with us, and I'm glad that you're in our community. And I'm glad you're here. Yeah. And glad your wife finally joined you too. Finally. Yeah. It took 6 months, but she's here, and my sermons have gotten better. Well, it helps. It really does help. It does. Thank you guys for joining us. Remember, if you have a question about today's episode, you can email me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. If you have a question specifically for Matthew, we'll send it on to him. I'm sure he'd be willing to answer it or respond. We just thank you for tuning in. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.